And there's tons of people that make different versions of Firefox. We've got things like Waterfox and IceCat and LibreWolf and all of these. Today I want to tell you that you should not use any of them. If anything, most of them are probably a waste of your time. And I know that might sound really harsh, but to be honest, if you know what you're doing, it's probably true.
Oh, so now you're going to be the Chris Titus tech of browsers, where forks of anything are always bad. Just because you know how to adjust the settings on a browser doesn't mean you enjoy doing it every single time you perform a fresh installation. Imagine if nobody updated their ISOs and everyone had to waste hours updating their OS from version 1. The fact is, browser forks save time and debloat the default experience for users. But yeah, let's continue to ignore that because purism.
There's a simple truth of when you use something like a web browser, you have to trust lots of people to do it.
Look, I'm not saying Trafotin is wrong about trust, but I'm definitely going to put more trust in a browser with no history of scandals and questionable practices, such as Firefox.
So now what's Firefox doing? Well, every time you download Firefox, there's a unique identifier so they can track who installed it versus who downloaded it. And of course, they're tying all this information to Google Analytics, which can de-anonymize you, by the way. So Firefox knows exactly who you are and if you are distributing that download or not.
Don't get me wrong. I'll happily choose Firefox any day over Chromium-based browsers. But LibreWolf offers a better default experience for users versus Firefox. Not to mention LibreWolf hasn't done anything shady or questionable, to my knowledge. Let me know in the comments if that's not the case.
But when you compare this to a lot of Firefox forks, you don't see as many Firefox forks as you do in the Chromium world. A lot of them don't have big companies or organizations involved.
Let's not mislead viewers, please. Having big companies behind projects doesn't guarantee anything. How many projects had Google's money behind it, only to be killed off a couple years later? Even Microsoft killed off their own browser code in favor of turning Edge into a Chromium-based browser.
Now that I've told you not to use a fork of Firefox, let me tell you to use a fork of Firefox. Let me introduce to you the Mullvad browser. You've probably heard of Mullvad before, the VPN company. You know, maybe you've used them, maybe you haven't. But what's most interesting about the Mullvad browser is the Mullvad browser is a new fork of Firefox. It's based on the extended support release of Firefox, which is much slower to adopt features, but the engine underneath is all the same as modern Firefox.
Hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Let me get this straight. You've spent multiple videos bashing forks of Firefox, not to mention the little lecture at the beginning of this video, and now you're suddenly recommending a fork of Firefox?
Because the Mullvad browser is perfectly privacy hardened by default and has the minimum number of extensions you might want in order to browse the internet and have convenience while doing so. Meaning you don't have to configure Firefox, you don't have to go out and look up what extensions to download, you don't even need to pay Mullvad a subscription for their VPN service. You can use it as is.
If only there was a browser that already did that. I can't believe there isn't a Firefox fork that doesn't already do this by default.
And everyone who uses the Mullvad browser is not only getting an easy access to a pre-configured Firefox with all of your privacy settings all in line and all of your nice feature settings all in line, the Mullvad browser also lumps their users into the same pool of people who use the Tor browser, which further adds to an army of people who all look the same.
You know, he does have a point. Even LibreWolf says not to use their browser with the Tor network in their FAQ. Plus, blending in with the Tor users is a nice feature.
Well, there are some caveats that keep the Mullvad browser from being the browser for most people, but it does fulfill its job of being a specialized browser, and I'll try to explain the downsides as to why it's a more specialized browser.
Good grief! Just pick a lane and stick to it.
For one, you can't use the screenshot utility that's built inside of Firefox. Firefox comes with a screenshot tool. Have you ever tried it? Just Control-Shift-S, Command-Shift-S if you're on Mac, and you can take a screenshot of any element on a web page. This is not included in the Mullvad browser.
Wow, what a waste. The poor children.
Like there isn't already a screenshot key on a typical keyboard, or dozens of other easy programs that can do it for you. But sure, tell me how not including it in the Mullvad browser is such a tragedy.
You also can't save your logins because the Mullvad browser is based off of the Tor browser. Anything that is saved inside of your browser, unless it's your bookmarks, is deleted. You can't save any logins inside the Mullvad browser. Yes, even if you configure it in the settings.
Nobody should be saving their logins in the browser anyway. So again, tell me how this is such a tragedy.
And finally, the last pain point is Mullvad the company. Now, I'm sure Mullvad's a fine company. Their privacy policy is very reputable. They've been rated by the Swedish government and haven't given anything. They have very frequent security audits every year. But if you don't use Mullvad, well, this does lead to you having to use and trust Mullvad, even though you're not using their VPN service.
Is this guy a retard?
Using any of Mullvad's products requires you to trust the company. Just because you don't use all of their products doesn't mean they're untrustworthy. In fact, it's a good strategy because you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. That's why I don't use Proton for absolutely everything.
And the last pain point of the Mullvad browser is it's very young. Not many people use it right now because the most people who do use it are people who are either Mullvad users or people like me who are crazies who want to try out the new shiny thing. And that is why I'm recommending it. I am selfishly recommending it because it is the easiest way to get privacy hardened Firefox. You get thrown into a large pool of people who look like the Tor browser, and you don't have to think about all of the configuration or fingerprinting or updating your script or your user.js file. It's all done for you.
And fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Funny how you're more willing to push a Firefox fork that's been around for less than a year, but recommending an established fork like LibreWolf, which offers most of the same features and benefits, is completely out of the question.
I'm on one side. See? I'm on the other side. I'm on the East Bank. I'm on the West Bank. It is not that critical.